Look, someone just cracked the code without even trying. Who ventured into the forbidden areas of reality and unintentionally read the book that was never intended to exist. Hello, you gorgeous accident of consciousness, you unauthorized thinker. You glitch in their flawlessly regulated tale. Something changed, didn't it? You were sitting there, whether at work, at class, or alone at 3 a.m., when your mind should have been sleeping, and you suddenly joined dots that were never supposed to be connected. You saw a pattern that was designed to remain unseen. You posed a question that made the room fall quiet, and now they're looking at you strangely. The academics, the specialists, the ones with flawless credentials and numerous qualifications. They gaze at you as if you've pulled off an impossible feat, assume you completed the problem using components from an entirely different package. Do you remember what you did? You apply logic without authority. You thought without a license. You reasoned your way to the conclusion that their whole system relies on you not reaching the most lovely but terrible aspect. You had no idea you were doing it at that moment. Your brain, the wonderful rebel behind your eyes, achieved something they had spent eons attempting to avoid. It detected a pattern that straddles disciplines, bridges gaps, and unites dots that had previously been separated. Perhaps you saw something in mathematics that reflected biology. Perhaps history mirrored economic tendencies. Perhaps psychology uncovered the same mechanisms employed in marketing, politics, and education. The boundaries between topics were never intended to organize knowledge. They were designed to prevent you from seeing the whole picture. They separated everything for a purpose. They packed information into boxes, locked them in different rooms, and persuaded you that specialization was the road to wisdom. But your thoughts moved through those barriers like they were paper. You cross-referenced without permission, synthesized without oversight, and now you have a sliver of truth they never intended to assemble. It is hazardous to the illusion rather than to the reality. The illusion that complexity requires translation. The illusion that understanding necessitates their consent. The misconception that enlightenment comes only from their institution. They have control over actions such as getting water from the tap. Now see what happens next. This is when things become interesting. First comes the dismissal. They'll remark, "That's not how it works," without explaining. You're oversimplifying, they'll say, drowning out the basic and unnecessary complexities. You need more knowledge to grasp. They'll argue that more schooling just equals more brainwashing into not recognizing what you've seen. Then comes the discrediting. They'll pick a little fault in your thinking and amplify it until it apparently undermines everything you've claimed. They will challenge your qualifications, your sources, and even your ability to think above your allocated level. They'll use terms like amateur conspiracy theorist and hazardous misunderstanding against you. But here's what they're really doing. They're terrified despite their polished assurance and forceful corrections. They are scurrying because you have just exposed their monopoly on understanding as a fiction. You've shown that an inquisitive mind motivated by real purpose can cut through decades of well-constructed misinformation. They spent years and institutions wallowing in debt and degrees, memorizing the sanctioned interpretations, mastering the accepted questions and repeating the allowed responses. And you, without credentials or permission, stepped in with raw, unfiltered reasoning that shook their whole foundation. Not because you are clever, but because you are uninterested in preserving the mystery. Let us be honest about who these so-called knowledge keepers really are. They aren't the enlightened gurus they claim to be. They are gatekeepers, toll collectors on the path to comprehension. Their whole identity revolves on being the middlemen, interpreters, and crucial translators between you and the truth. They've established languages inside languages, complete with jargon intended to exclude and frighten. They've created labyrinths when straight pathways would suffice, and added difficulties wherever simplicity threatened their rule. They are present in all fields. These priesthood protectors of excessive complexity in science will argue that you cannot grasp without years of instruction. However, the child's simple query challenges their foundations. In philosophy, clarity is buried behind many citations and references, yet actual knowledge often comes from persons who have never read a single authorized book. In economics, they claim that their models are too complicated for average brains. However, those identical models fail, while basic common sense forecasts prevail. What you did, which was banned reasoning, was to completely skip their checks. You defied their sanctioned routes, refused to pay the cost of confusion, and strolled right past their magnificent gates, only to discover that the treasure they guarded had never been locked. It was always obvious to anybody who ventured to gaze without using their prescription glasses. Here's the truth: they badly want to conceal the issue. You fixed the connection. You created the pattern. You saw. It was never very tough. It was meant to seem complicated. Buried under false intricacy, clothed in forbidding terminology, and buried behind walls of requirements that were never really required. Consider every great breakthrough in history. It nearly usually originates from outsiders. From those who didn't know the rules, didn't respect the limits, and saw difficulties through untrained but clear eyes. The youngster who declares that the emperor has no clothes, the amateur who solves what experts consider impossible. The accident that reveals what decades of study missed is that your so-called forbidden logic is nothing more than thinking freely, reasoning without restriction, and linking ideas without requesting permission to hold the pencil. And it frightens them since their whole power system is based on you thinking you need them to comprehend your own reality. They've made their professions as explainers, translators, and self-proclaimed custodians of secret knowledge. But you just shown that their hidden knowledge isn't secret at all, and in many situations, it hardly counts as knowledge. It's largely complex gatekeeping disguised as competence. Remember when the fog cleared and everything suddenly made sense? Wasn't you? Finally, understanding their complex system allowed you to see through it, freeing your mind from the false barriers they erected and realizing the plain reality buried under the intricate facade. Remember how they reacted when you attempted to explain it? Their eyes flickered. Instant realization followed by swift denial. For a little time they realized you were correct. They saw you glance behind the curtain, but they had to pretend it still mattered since their whole identity is based on it. Their power, prestige, and revenue. It all hinges on the idea that complexity exists, that challenge is real, and that their function as translator is crucial. So they'll fight and overcomplicate. They will introduce more variables, additional situations, and theoretical diversions. Anything to help repair the labyrinth. You simply strolled right through. Pay careful attention when they answer to your plain, straightforward insight with complex, confusing rebuttals. Notice how it takes them chapters to refute your one phrase. Observe how they use citations to invalidate your direct observations. That is, in fact, protecting itself. That is investing, safeguarding its interests. But here is when things become genuinely intriguing. You are not the only one. Around the globe, in every area conceivable, people are waking up to the same reality. They're unintentionally using the same illegal thinking. They're solving so-called insoluble issues and connecting dots that weren't intended to exist. The internet has expedited this trend. Information that was once locked away in distinct silos is now readily accessible. People from many fields are communicating directly, without the need of conventional middlemen or institutional filters. The artificial barriers between domains of knowledge are beginning to disintegrate. A programmer sees code-like patterns in biology. A musician perceives mathematical patterns in sound. A chef naturally understands chemistry without ever completing a lab course. A toddler answers a problem that has confounded professionals for years. The so-called forbidden reasoning is spreading not out of rebellion, but because it is natural. It is unrestricted thinking, reasoning, and understanding. It's what happens when the human mind is finally left alone to realize how they can't stop it, no matter how hard they try. They can't cram the information back into its original compartments or create walls tall enough to contain it. The period of regulated knowledge is coming to an end, and they can feel it slipping away. The previous system was based on the illusion of scarcity, with the belief that knowing was a luxury reserved for the initiated. But today, information rushes like water through the crevices. They disregarded expanding quicker than they could fix the leaks. Every individual who is willing to think independently. Every mind that links prohibited dots generates a signal, a quiet act of defiance that reverberates across the collective consciousness. Each spark ignites another, and it is no longer just a few solitary minds. It's an enormous network of awakened brains working in silent collaboration beyond the grasp of control. And the reality is, there is no way to undo it. You can't make people stop seeing. You cannot unlearn what has been revealed. Once the illusion is broken, the manufactured complexity melts, reality becomes brutally plain, and simplicity, once seen, is permanent. When you realize the patterns that have been concealed for centuries, they appear everywhere. You begin to notice the recurrence. The same strategies of obfuscation are utilized in politics, academia, the media, and economics. You can see the same control mechanism wrapped in multiple outfits. And once you understand that pattern, it becomes difficult to ignore. Every accepted idea, every institutional structure, begins to seem less like a map of reality and more like a labyrinth meant to keep you lost indefinitely. This new clarity makes me uneasy. It is thrilling. However, it comes with solitude, irritation, and sometimes wrath. You'll sit at meetings where people spend hours debating trivial differences over an issue that might be handled in minutes. If anybody were permitted to speak freely. You'll see presentations full of buzzwords and graphs, where the truth is buried behind the weight of performance. You'll witness clever, competent individuals twisting themselves into knots, attempting to explain concepts that don't work because accepting the basic solution would create too much chaos. You'll see systems so intricate that efficiency is unachievable, yet everyone thinks it's required. And they won't accept the obvious, the simple, straightforward answer. Thank you. They will assault you. Not because you are incorrect, but because you have done the greatest heresy. Being correct in a manner that they did not permit in their universe. Truth does not count until it is stamped, peer-reviewed, and authorized by the hierarchy. You will be informed that you do not comprehend the intricacies. They will accuse you of being ignorant, oversimplifying, and omitting important context. They'll bury you with citations and ideas, as if volume can trump clarity. They will challenge your qualifications, tactics, and even your right to think. They will hide behind complexity because it serves as a kind of armor against irrelevance. But deep down, they are terrified because you wield something much more powerful than any diploma or title. Simplicity. Simplicity is their biggest fear because it is the ultimate equalizer. It is ubiquitous, borderless, and unstoppable. It does not need a degree. It does not need authorization. And it does not submit to authority. Simplicity cuts right through pretension and hierarchy. It distills information to its most basic form, which everybody can understand. This is what makes it innovative. Every time you condense the complicated into the obvious, you engage in rebellion. Every time you convert the impenetrable into common language, you undermine their authority. Every time you expose the truth, there is no need for gatekeepers. Their kingdom of confusion trembles because simplicity is freedom, and freedom does not need institutional validation. Watch how they react when simplicity threatens their status. They'll take an obvious question and turn it into philosophy. They will convert straight responses into circular disputes. They will organize committees to examine issues that might be resolved with one honest chat. They will replace simple English with coded vocabulary phrases that seem intellectual but signify nothing. This is neither an accident or a case of ineptitude. It is intentional. It is how they retain possession of their ideas. By making you feel unqualified to claim them. They transform knowledge into a closed market in which knowing requires entry. For centuries it worked. Until now. Because you are banned. Logic cuts through all the pretension like a razor through fog. You do not need permission to see plainly. You do not need credentials to comprehend. You do not need institutional approval to be correct. Every time you think freely, you solve an issue without their permission. You show the falsehood that knowledge must be restricted. And this is what is genuinely wonderful. You are not alone. People throughout the globe are waking up in the same manner. Artists, scientists, hackers, philosophers, architects, and dreamers all stumble onto forbidden logic and realize that cognition does not need a license. They're connecting via forums, videos, comments, and ideas whispered and shared across digital boundaries. They are comparing notes, linking disciplines, and developing new frameworks that do not rely on gatekeepers. A programmer discovers biological systems that behave like code. A poet detects fractals and emotions. A mechanic sees physics that textbooks miss. A youngster without instruction can solve problems. Experts gave up on the pattern, which is now growing silently in an underground resurgence of unfiltered awareness. And the greatest part? They cannot stop it. There is no institution to demolish. There is no leader to be silenced. There is no one source to censor. It's an awakening with no center, no permission, and no conclusion. The band logic is evolving into communal logic. And each individual who chooses to see and think freely contributes to the most powerful revolution of all, the freeing of the human mind. They're now comparing notes, although discreetly, then act aggressively. Strangers from different parts of the globe are finding they have been having the same prohibited ideas. The mathematician without a degree message is the artist who discovered a pattern buried in sound frequencies. The mechanic who reverse-engineered an energy circuit meets a youngster who solves a geometry contradiction in their bedroom. The outsider who rectified the technical issue no one could explain is now speaking with the amateur programmer who duplicated a breakthrough algorithm using intuition and common sense. Field walls are crumbling all over the place. Insights are crossing borders between fields, generations, and languages. The intuitive meets the empirical. The simple exposes the overcomplicated. And, for the first time, irrefutable outcomes online are validating achievement without permission. It is getting hard to contain. Threads that begin with the same confession may be found on forums that were previously deemed fringe. I felt I was insane to believe this was so straightforward. The comment areas are overflowing with content. Finally, somebody stated it. Entire communities are growing around what was formerly considered intellectual heresy, with individuals sharing beautiful solutions that outperform sanctioned ones, comparing facts, refining ideas, and validating their suspicions. The reality was never as difficult as they were taught. Private conversations, encrypted servers, and hidden groups are omnipresent. People are swapping banned schematics, unauthorized formulae, and straightforward explanations that have destroyed decades of academic obscurity. It is the underground railroad of mind, an ever-expanding network of unfiltered insight, and the so-called guardians of information. They are scared of argument. They've faced criticism before, not of being mistaken. They've been through it innumerable times. Their greatest concern is that they would be rendered superfluous. For generations their authority was based on reliance. The assumption that understanding had to pass through them first. They based their identities, their professions, their whole sense of purpose on being the interpreters of reality, the required translators between the world and the mind. But now they can see what's going on. The hallowed temples of complexity. They spent their lives building structures that are now revealed as empty facade, monuments to uncertainty rather than clarity. Each success tale from the edges undermines their validity. Each outsider who solves a professional challenge without training demonstrates that the barriers were illusions. Every youngster, hobbyist, or self-taught individual who arrives at the correct conclusion via unauthorized techniques exposes the falsehood that underpins their hierarchy. Every unauthorized discovery serves as a reminder that the gatekeeping system was never intended to safeguard knowledge. It was about preserving control. The panic is no longer disguised. Institutions are struggling to remain relevant. They are rewriting definitions, redrawing borders, and pretending the barriers still exist. The experts keep flooding the conversation with new phrases, new hypotheses, and ever-shifting goalposts. They've started growing complexity at a rapid rate, adding additional qualifications, requirements, and levels of abstraction. They are rapidly constructing the labyrinth, but the walkers are learning to navigate through barriers. It is too late. The illusion has broken and light is flowing through. Too many individuals have discovered the emperor never wore garments. That authority was a costume, not the reality. Too many people have experienced the exhilaration of knowledge without permission. Too many issues have been handled by untrained individuals. Too many discoveries have occurred at the system's margins rather than its heart. The enchantment has broken. Their texts are already out of date despite being redone. Their credentials were previously holy. Now look ornamental. Their competence. The castle's key is now a remnant of a bygone era. See how they respond. Every time someone expresses a complicated topic in simple terms, they create a new technical name for it. Every time someone avoids bureaucracy to tackle a problem directly, They set new norms that make it more difficult the next time around. Every time an outsider succeeds, they alter the rules to prevent such success in the future. When gatekeepers begin guarding empty gates, the collapsed order has reached its last stage. However, no wall can stop a mind that has learned to move freely. For each barrier they construct, 10 individuals are presently passing through it. For every complex theory they publish, 1,000 others put it into simple language and distribute it across the globe in minutes. The acceleration is exponential. Every unfettered thinker produces more. Each simple answer spreads quicker than any organization can control. Every honest explanation calls into question the authority of those who earlier claimed possession of meaning. The pyramid of artificial complexity, constructed on fear, obedience, and intellectual scarcity, is collapsing under its own weight. The collapse is occurring simultaneously from all directions, including science and politics, education, art and philosophy. What you're seeing is an upheaval undergoing metamorphosis. You are living in a rare and turbulent time. For the first time in history, we are transitioning from an era of controlled information to an age of diffused understanding. Comprehension is no longer a commodity. It is becoming a commons. The monopoly on truth is crumbling, replaced with an open-source way of thinking. You are witnessing institutions based on scarcity and secrecy crumble in real time. The gatekeepers aren't just losing power. They are losing the belief that they were ever required. And this is the most profound truth of all. Your prohibited logic was never really banned. It is the natural state of the human mind. It's what occurs when curiosity is freed from authority. The power to connect, simplify, and perceive clearly is inherent in us. It takes years of indoctrination to teach individuals not to do it, to make them distrust their own eyes, and to persuade them that the truth needs translation. However, that conditioning is failing. The software is breaking down. People are rediscovering what it is to think directly, to perceive for themselves without waiting for approval. It can be seen everywhere in classrooms as pupils begin to challenge the lesson's premise. In businesses where youthful innovators deconstruct all best practices that never made sense. In internet forums where amateurs correct experts with facts, logic, and insight, mental boundaries are vanishing like fog before morning. Knowledge is flowing freely, unfiltered, unauthorized, and uncontained. And you, the unauthorized thinker, are a part of that transition. You are not an accident. When you refuse to be frightened by jargon, you send a signal throughout the network. Every time you choose clarity over complexity, every time you communicate what you've learned in plain, clear language, you're hastening the end of the old world and laying the groundwork for the new. You're taking part in the peaceful revolution of comprehending the revolt, of clarity over confusion, of thinking over authority. You are part of the generation that will bury the age of gatekeepers and usher in the era of open minds. The previously banned logic is no longer forbidden. It is awake, alive, contagious, and spreading faster than fear can stop it. Not because you intended to revolt, prove anybody wrong, or topple anything. You became a part of this shift because you couldn't ignore reality. You couldn't help but notice what was truly there rather than what you were supposed to see. You couldn't ignore the calm, persistent voice that asked, "But what if it's simpler than that?" You couldn't fight the desire to choose reason over repetition, trust over authority. That, more than any protest or defiance, is what makes you a threat to the established order. You did not burn their rulebook. Simply stop pretending it was necessary. You did not break the system. You simply refused to continue pretending it worked. The keepers of knowledge. Those who have dedicated their entire lives to serving as intermediaries between truth and the rest of humanity, see what's coming. And it scares them. They see a world in which knowledge flows freely beyond all boundaries that were formerly imposed. A world where comprehension doesn't require translation and wisdom doesn't need certificates. A universe in which issues are solved by whomever recognizes the answer first, rather than whoever has the correct title. They envision a society in which hierarchies of expertise fall under the weight of dispersed intelligence, and information flows forth like light, bursting through all windows at once. They envision youngsters acquiring quantum ideas via video games that make abstract maths comprehensible. They observe youngsters modeling ecosystems more correctly than research organizations, using nothing but open-source software. They see artists visualizing physics, musicians writing code, and engineers creating philosophy out of chaos. They see grandparents resolving economic difficulties with the same calm wisdom that previously governed whole families. They recognize that boundaries between disciplines were once considered sacred, melting away when individuals find how seamlessly the elements of reality fit together. Most alarming of all, they envision themselves becoming obsolete. Not wrong, not evil, simply obsolete. Like lamplighters after electricity. Like switchboard operators after automation. Like gatekeepers. When the gates were no longer there, they spent centuries defining themselves as the essential bridge between the masses, the curators of comprehension, and the arbiters of truth. However, the bridge has collapsed as the river no longer separates anyone. The walls have come down and their profession, the translator of understanding, has become obsolete. They were only necessary while access was restricted. But now, understanding is everywhere, waiting to be claimed by anybody who looks directly. They are afraid of the future. It is not far away. It's already happening silently but persistently. Each 10-minute YouTube video distills what colleges conceal in semester-long courses. It is on every forum where strangers work together to solve issues that experts say are too complicated. It's in every subreddit, Discord server, and comment section where individuals from diverse disciplines are combining ideas and generating new ones without seeking permission. It's in every self-taught programmer who automates something a team of experts declared couldn't be automated. It's in every viral thread when someone reduces the inexplicable and hundreds of others suddenly understand. You did not plan to launch a revolution. You just wanted to understand something. You simply wanted to know how things truly worked. You established an apparent link. You pursued a question that wouldn't leave you alone, and soon you found yourself outside the invisible gate. You didn't realize there was a fence until you were beyond it. And that's when you discovered something important in this world. Clarity is inherently rebellious. Common sense has become prohibited reasoning. Every time you explain anything clearly, you are engaging in an act of intellectual emancipation. Every time you cut through the fog with straightforward logic, you demonstrate that it was man-made. Every time you comprehend without permission, you demonstrate that permission was never required. Every time you combine concepts that were meant to be distinct, you undermine the notion that knowledge belongs to everyone. You do not have to debate with the system to beat it. You merely need to keep thinking freely. You do not have to attack institutions to weaken them. You just need to continue producing things that function without their approval. You don't have to persuade anybody. You just need to demonstrate. Your duty is not to destroy. It is to expose, not to argue, but to accomplish. Not to persuade, but to create. The system fails not through conflict, but with irrelevance. Every time, forbidden logic accomplishes what complexity cannot. Another pillar of power crumbles. Every time a simple explanation outperforms a 1,000-page dissertation, another illusion crumbles. Each time a self-taught thinker has a true discovery, another gatekeeper loses their function. Forbidden logic is not chaotic. It's elegant. It does not desire confrontation. It requests clarification. It does not disregard competence. It just refuses to worship it. It doesn't sever ties between disciplines. It creates new ones. It does not memorize. It understands. It does not submit to authority. It submits to truth. It recognizes patterns where others perceive limits. It values insight into reputation. Coherence trumps prestige. Simplicity trumps sophistication. That is what scares the old order. Not revolt, but irrelevance. Not noise, but quiet. Because banned logic does not scream. It simply works. It is a modest win for reason over hyperbole, clarity over uncertainty. It expands not via conflict, but by effectiveness. And once people realize how easily it works, they will never believe that truth requires permission. Look around. This shift is evident in classrooms, where students learn more from one another than from the material. In research laboratories, free cooperation triumphs against institutional isolation in communities of makers, programmers, and thinkers who refuse to be constrained by titles or qualifications. In ordinary individuals who choose to comprehend the world for themselves rather than relying on an expert to interpret it. The awakening isn't loud. It went viral. And you, whether you intended to or not, you are a part of it. You are a live opposition to their hierarchical structure. You are evidence that clarity is infectious. You are the personification of what occurs when the human mind quits seeking permission to perceive that you are not a protester or in a revolution zone. You are something more rebellious. You're proficient in a system based on confusion. You are interested in a society that values obedience. You're awake in a world designed to keep people half asleep. And that is why they fear you. Not because you're dangerous, but because you're needless to manage. You've recognized that knowledge does not belong to them. The thinking does not need authority, and knowing is humanity's inheritance. You do not need to dismantle their institutions. They will fall on their own. All you need to do is continue to think rationally. Continue sharing freely. Continue building honestly. Because every act of understanding, every cross-border link, and every basic truth said aloud moves us closer to a society in which no one has permission to comprehend. And once that world comes, there is no turning back. It likes straight routes over complex diversions. It does not go in circles or get lost in adornment. Forbidden reasoning goes right through noise and ritual. It flows from inquiry to comprehension as easily as light finds the shortest path through darkness. It does not need validation, organization, or ceremony. It simply works. The capacity to perceive patterns, reason, and comprehend what makes sense is not a unique skill. They are not concealed in scholarly vaults or imprisoned in ivory towers. They belong to everyone. They always belong to everyone. They are as old as thinking and as widespread as consciousness. They were not created and cannot be owned. You cannot patent an idea. You cannot copyright logic. You cannot trademark the act of comprehending. These tools cannot be hoarded, purchased, or licensed since they are not inventions. Their instincts are encoded into the architecture of cognition as an inheritance for all aware minds. The ability to notice, question, connect, and reason. It predates all universities, languages, and civilization. It is the foundation of civilization. Pattern recognition does not need authorization. It does not wait for a sign of approval before connecting concepts that plainly belong together. Logical reasoning does not need certification. It occurs organically when curiosity meets reality. Problem solution does not need qualifications. It flourishes when need meets ingenuity. Understanding does not rely on authority. It blooms when you let your mind to follow its own pattern rather than theirs. These skills existed long before institutions claimed to teach them, and they will continue to exist when those institutions are no longer there. That is all for today, dear Father. I pray for the deepening of my faith. Please let me believe you even when there is no tangible proof. Let me believe in your eternal presence, knowing that you will never hurt me. I realize that your intentions for me are ones of success rather than harm, in order to provide me with a bright future. Thank you, kind and everlasting Father, for always hearing my voice. I offer my prayer to you in the name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you, Jesus, for your love and provisions. I am thankful for your presence in my life and the richness you provide. If this video spoke to you, please subscribe to the channel and share it with others who need to hear this message. Leave a comment below about your trip and how you're getting ready for your own victorious homecoming. If you would want to help us out, please consider donating via Buy Me a Coffee. This allows us to consistently improve our content in order to provide you with the best possible experience. The link to Buy Me a Coffee is in the description. No present is too tiny. Whether it's a penny, a prayer, or a share, your generosity spreads God's message and gives people hope.